overview of what we've been talking about all since the beginning of second semester. As I say, intervals is not an easy thing. Just like how many syllables do you think there are? Think about it, in the English language, there's got to be a lot. I was going to say thousands, but it might not be that many, but at least hundreds of different syllables. Think of all the combinations of syllables. You know, syllables are 2 or 3 letter things. Syllables are really cool, you know. Like phonics, to learn how to to learn how to read really fast. Maybe the same thing would work on music. Oh yeah. If we learned intervals, then the intervals would make us learn how to do chords really fast, which would in tune would make us play really fast and learn really fast and be able to enjoy music really fast on the keyboard. So if we're learning our syllables right now, and I stop and I hold us here in intervals for a while, in fact, because we need to correlate these number intervals with street numbers. So right away, I have to say there is no half street number. They're full numbers. Sometimes they have an M in front of them. Later on, sometimes they have a plus in front of them. Sometimes they have an MAJ in front of them. But here's the cool thing. Between 1 and 2 is our little secret. The only thing that's there is 1/2 step. And it's our measurement tool. We can always use a half step or a whole step, because additions to make certain intervals are wholes and half steps added together. A whole step equals a second. A whole step plus a half step equals an M3, because a 2 and an M3 touch each other. I'll show you in just a little bit what I'm talking about. But like, for example, wherever we're starting as a 1 and we go to a 2, which is a whole step away, 2 and M3 touch each other. You have to be able to feel how to squish your fingers together to touch each other between a 2 and an M3. So that's the distancing in between a half step and a whole step, how it is important to really know your distancing in your finger feeling between a half step and a whole step. So you can hold your hand a whole step apart and there'll be one note in between is great, but also to be able to touch your 2 fingers together to make a half step is really cool feeling too. You have to learn both. Because it's very important in intervals, because intervals sometimes go into half step feels and whole step feels. So here is then the next interval, as we were talking about, the 3. Very common interval. We've seen it in every major street. The 4, we see it both major street and blues street. The +4, we only see it in blues street. The 5, we see it in both blues street and major streets. Blues streets or major streets. The +5, we see it in neither. The +5 is that odd little thing in there, but it's a very cool thing because we have to identify, because I promised way down here that in between 1 and 2, we would let it slip that we have 1 note in between. But then from then on, every note touches each other. I'm making a number that identifies with it, that touches each other, but all the way through the 2 different kinds of 7s, a regular 7 and a MAJ 7. They too are separated by half steps, but the first one, if you got to go backwards from an 8, would be a major 7 is only 1/2 step away, coupling down, while a 7 is 1 whole step away, coupling notch in pitch and to the left. And then we're going to find every single interval that goes from 1 all the way to 8. And that's what I was showing on that board. How many of them are? There are 12 of them. This is the first one. This is the second one. As I said, it has a note in between called a half. We don't talk about it because it's a measurement only, not an interval. This, number 2, is an interval. So this is the second interval that we're learning. But then it's going to get kind of weird when I start talking about numbers, so I'm just going to start talking about what they actually are, touching each other. From now on, there's no more in-betweens. I'm going to label everything that touches each other. A 2 touches an M3. It's really cool. I call it the boot M3. The boot M3 then goes further to the full 3. Now the 3, which you've also heard in major street, in a major town is true. So this is absolutely true. From the root here, a 3 is a big, huge note in a major town. Then we go and we touch. What touches a 3 on this side? You know, over here it touches an M3, okay? Going shorter, going towards 1. But going further to the right, coming higher in pitch, it's going from 1 root. And it's, another word for 1 is root, or unison, I always like to call it. From 3, luckily, there's nothing in between 3 and 4. It touches. Brother, sister, they're very, very close. They are touching. They are a half step apart between 3 and 4. So you always know your 3s and 4s because they're a half step apart. You kind of always know your 1 and 2s because they're a whole step apart. And there's got to be a 5. And that 5, though, is tricky because it doesn't have that luck of being able to touch each other like 3 and 4. It has a note in between. And it is the note that we have to label plus. As you saw in that board, that board showed +4. +4 is that note in between. That's how we label it. 4 to +4 and then the 5. How does it show on the keyboard? Again, the best way to see is with C. C sticks out the whole step and half step pattern very, 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 very carefully. And in between the whole step and the whole step, when we get to the half step, because we have no whole step in between. There is no whole step to make because there's no note in between. Told ya, 12. 12. There's 12 different intervals. It sticks out at you when you're looking at C, because you can see it, right? On the keyboard, you can see it. The reason you can see it is because in C, because the sharps stick out at you, they're actually higher in height than the letter side. The sharps are actually higher. That is so cool. They stick out at you because they're higher and they need to be noticed and respected. If you can remember that they are sharps and they have positions in between, especially in C, when you're looking at C, they have labels because it identifies another one of the unknown notes that are not labeled as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, major 7, 8. As major 7, 8 in Major Town becomes 7, 8 in Blues Town. We can learn that later. But let's just try to identify, is there a thing? Yes, this is called a 7. It is called a 7, just a 7, not an MHA 7, a 7. It is a number 7 away from this. It happens to be a whole step down from this note. I'm going to move this to the center a little bit more. 7 happens to be a whole step down from this note. Okay. Or a major 7 happens to be touching, not a whole step down, but all the way to this side before it gets to 8, touching over here. Or all the way to this side to a 7 before in between it gets to an 8. Intervals are fun. So, everything that we're talking about in intervals is in between 1 and 8. There are many things that are in between 1 and 8, but the cool thing is a lot of times when we first started last semester, well actually second semester, we were starting at 1. And we were building to the right of 1. We're going to the second. We're going to the M3, you know, the boot M3. You know, the thing that is a whole plus a half. You know, the thing that is right next to a third, but not a third, less than a third. This is an M3, this is a 3. Right next to a 3 is a boot M3 that's a little bit less away from 1 than 3 is. But there's really something really great about this. This M3 has notes in between. And this 3 has notes in between. The notes in between 1 and M3 are 2 notes. Watch the keys. Via MIDI, sending signals out from this keyboard to this keyboard. Same note, same note, same note, same note, same note, same note. E, 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 G, 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 G. If I'm playing an E here and a G here, I am playing an M3 apart. I'm actually playing an interval apart. The reason I am is because I'm playing with 2 notes in between. F and G sharp in between. G and E and G make a M3. Not only an M3, but a boot M3, because an M3 technically is a W, which as we know is a whole step, which is 1 note in between, and another half step. So a W plus a half step equals an M3. Yes, an M3 off the root. Whoa. An M3 off the root. That distance from 1 to M3, going to the right, going higher in pitch, has 2 notes in between. But then what touches an M3 going even higher? What touches in a half step mode, like we were saying chromatically? It is a 3. It touches it. It is the same number as this, but this has a little M in front of it. This is an M3. Boot M3. Boot M3 is the same 3. But then 3 is just a 3. There's no M in front of it or anything. The importance is that if you go even further, 2 touches M3. 3 touches M3. 2 touches M3. 2 is the second interval off of 1. Remember, there is no half. Even though there's 1 note in between 1 and 2, now we touch every note. After the first step off, after that first step off from 1 to 2, from 1 to 2 is a whole step. 1 to 2 is one of these W's right here. That means there's 1 note in between, because we don't go from 1 to 1/2 to the right. We go from 1 to 1/2 to the left. From 8 down 1/2 is a, what touches an 8? What touches an 8? What touches an 8? What touches an 8? G sharp. Well, that's the middle of the 3s. What touches an 8? A MAJ7. Not an M7, an MAJ7. It's an actual notational lettering that is in front of the number 7. It's not just a 7 interval off of that 1. It's an MAJ7 because it's a member of a major street. For example, here's D major street. If we go from here, it's 1 and D is 8. 1 is 8. 1 is D where it starts in the name of the street, and 8 is the octave of it, or the octavio, or the gong, please. 8th note away from the first note. Count them in letters. 1, 2, 3. Remember to count the first one as 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Goes to 8. Bing. Yep. Works out. That is the octave, the octavio of D. So the first and the 8th note are the same of letters, although they're 8 notes higher this way, to the right, higher. But now look at this. If I go to the left, 1/2 step, I'm in position right here between 1 and 8, right? And I go just touching this, and I go right to this 1/2 step. I get an MAJ7. I get an MAJ7. Bing, 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 bing. Touching 8 is MAJ7. But what is not touching 8 is 7. Just plain 7. 7 happens to be a member of a blues street. In any blues street, there is no MAJ in front of the 7 in the numbering. You have an 8, like we were talking about, you have a 1. By golly, you have one of those Whoa, sorry about that, Mr. Microphone, but we got a little bit high into the... M3 is just as far as 1 as you might think. But M3, what is really great about it is that it is only less steps in between. An M3 is from E to G. There's 2 steps in between. A 3, that big 3 that you only see if you're looking at a major street, that big 3 with no M in front of it has 3 notes in between. E to G sharp is a 3 because it has F, F sharp, and G in between. See those in between notes? The 2 notes that you're playing is E and G sharp. The 3 notes in between are F, F sharp, and G. Those 3 notes in between are really the in between notes. If I go down to only 2 notes in between, just F and F sharp, I've got an M3. The boot. The boot. The whole step plus the half step. The whole step is from E to F sharp. And then I'm going one more half step and I'm getting my M3 as of the formula of measurement, whole plus half. Remember those huge formulas? Oh my goodness, from last semester. Let's just remember those huge formulas. Well, this is kind of a formula board, but it's not quite the right board. But basically it's showing that 1 note in between gets you a 2. 2 notes in between gets you to an M3. 3 notes in between, 3 notes in between gets you to a 3. 4 notes in between gets you to a 4. 5 notes in between gets you a plus 4. But then I have minus, 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 minus 0. I do not even have any more in-betweens. After I get to 5 in-betweens, which I think is too many, I think to stop at 4 in-betweens is much more better than to stop at 5 in-betweens, because this in-between counting is really seriously crazy sometimes. But you need to know how to count those chromatic in-betweens. Chromatic meaning every single possible note, like whether it's a letter or up to a higher sharp. It's so important to know that those are equally as powerful and equally in-between notes, and you get to see it that way if you start counting notes in between. So it's always good to see, a whole step or a 2 is 1 note in between. That's really good to see. And it's good to see that M3 is a 2 notes in between. And it's good to see that a 3 note is a 3 step away from that 1, away from this root down here. A 3 step is 3 notes in between. And a 4th going a 4th away from that 1 is 4 notes in between. It happens at a plus 4, which we haven't talked that much about, but it's a really cool jump. Just like an M3 is different than a 3, a plus 4 is different than a 4. Just a plus 5 is different than a 5. Just like an MAJ7 is different than a 7. All these codes, how will we ever learn them? You will, because they're the same on every street. If you use an M3 and a certain street happens to be a blues street, it'll always be M3. If it's an MAJ7 used in major town streets, it'll always be major town. If it's a 7, just the number 7, it's always a blues town street. It's always a 7. If it's a 6, it's only in major town. If it's a plus 5, it's in neither. Neither. Okay, we'll come back to that. A 5, it's in both. Just like 8's in both. Both Bluestown and Major Town has a 5 and an 8. But they don't have a major 7 together sharing, and they don't have a 7 sharing, and they don't have a 6 and 7, and neither of them have a 5, plus 5. But they both have a 5. They both have a 5, which is 4 notes in between. And and only Bluestown has a plus 4, which is 5 notes in between. But that is silly. So far. But then there's a 4 in both a blues town and a major town. And there's a 3 only in a major town. And there's an M3 only in a blues town. And there's a 2 only in a major town. And there's a 1 in both a blues town and a major town. So complicated. Yes, but it repeats 12 times in each town. Over and over and over and over and over again. The same measurements, the same symbols, the same pluses or M's or MAJs or just a number or whatever are intervals, are numbered intervals that you need to learn, because intervals are the syllables of music, just like you had syllables first before you had words. You had syllables in the English language, you learned sh or e or lo or whatever, and then you put those together and you had dog or cat or climb or climb, I don't know. But anyways, you learn all kinds of tricks via phonics, via the division of words. Well, the division of chords, which is really the music and the beauty of music, the chords and the rhythm, 50% chords and 50% rhythm. Anyway, those letters are meaning the chords. Those are 3 or more notes, but 2 notes only at a time. Just 2 notes is an interval. 2 notes at a time is an interval. So if it's an interval, you have to have only 2 notes happening. Not 3 notes happening, but 2 notes happening. Because it's an interval. So we're talking intervals here. A 2 is an interval. 2 notes happening at one time. An M3 is an interval. 2 notes happening, called an M3. A 3 is an interval. It's not 3 notes happening. It's a distance between one and another number that is getting you an interval. If you learn your intervals, then you can put them into chords. You can use your syllables like you would to make words in the English language. If these are your syllables, or the intervals are your syllables, just like you had in the English language. So if you have the intervals really down really good, you know your intervals. You know what they look like. You know what they sound like. You know what they see like. You know what they feel like in between your distance of your fingers. If you know these intervals and you can test them by knowing the notes in between and all kinds of great games when you're going negatively down from 8, which I'm going to show you tonight some more. You can get to a major 7 really easy. You can get to a 7 really easy by just going one note in between. You can get to a 6th note because it's really just like an M3 down negative from an 8. You get to a -2, and then you can get all the way to a 5, which is -4, just like a 4th going higher from a root. You can go the 4th distance down from anything, or the M3 distance down from anything, or the 2nd distance down from anything, or even the half step down from anything, going this way and get an interval. Bing, bang, gong. Whoa! Melting, hold on, melting. Oh.